just while we're waiting, this is the NWS office. Little backdrop, got actually very topical. Polar bear up here. This was a photo taken by Andy Mann on one of our trips previously. Right up on the ship. Obviously not permitted these days, but a great experience all the same. And then back here, that was actually in South Georgia. We were the first company to ever be permitted drones down in South Georgia, in Antarctica. And that was working with David Yarrow and Netflix crew. So it was pretty good as well. So topical to the polar seminar today, webinar. Excuse me if it's a bit rough around the edges. And I think the plan is, we've got Tor there. I think you can see talking permitted, which is always a dangerous thing with Tor once she starts. But Tor, I think, will be fielding questions. Is that correct, Tor?
Yep, I'm ready to field any questions.
Great. Mittal, lovely to see you. Mr. Purdy, lovely to have you there. We may link in Mr. Purdy in a bit as well. He's one of our specialist leaders. If you don't know Graham Purdy, fantastic photographer, and joined us on this trip actually as well. So rather than me droning on, we may ask Graham to chip in. So if you hear some dulcet Irish tones, that's Graham piping up from Margate. But I think let's crack on. It's 5:03. I think there's a chat board or something. Tor will tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you can send through questions there. Excuse me. So feel free to ask questions as we go. And if it's topical, then what Tor may do is just interrupt and just say there's been a question, because I can't see the questions. If that doesn't work, we'll just do questions at the end. So thanks for everyone joining. It's great to have you here. Just to give you a bit of context, I'm sitting down in Brighton in the main NWS office. My name is Will Bolsover. I'm the founder and chief exec of Natural World Safaris. I set this business up 18 years ago now. The background of which was guiding out in Africa. I led a few trips out there. Background was mainly primates and working in Francophone Africa. So the Gabons of the world, Uganda, Rwanda, DRC, Madagascar, Congo, CAR, Morocco, areas like that. And from there, we set up World Primate Safaris, then brought on Big Cats with World Big Cat Safaris, then Bears, and then put it all under Natural World Safaris about 10 years ago. So our expertise is really about right place, right time. In the natural world, and often that revolves around wildlife as well. This trip is one of my favorites. We are launching it now. That's really why it's a first webinar. It's a trip that I did as a recce earlier this year with some great friends and colleagues on our journey to Nature's Edge, which was a trip that we put together in around April time with some specialists that we work with. Alistair Taylor-Young, a fantastic photographer, works mainly in the fashion industry. Chris Michael, portrait photographer for National Academy of Sciences. Ben Hardman, polar photographer, and Graham Purdy, not Graham Turdy, sorry, Graham. Black and white photographer, wildlife photographer, color as well, but does some exceptional work. If you haven't checked his channel out, check it out now. He's just come back from Kenya and done some stunning elephant images, which I was admiring yesterday. So this was the trip earlier this year that we went out and I said, look, we need to try and do things differently in this area. We operate up in polar regions. People are starting to do the same stuff. And at Natural World Safaris, we try and do it a bit differently. So it was really the opportunity to look at how we can do this region differently and combine the land and sea element. All of the images in this presentation and predominantly all of the images we use throughout our business are images that have been taken on the trips that we do. So by photographers, myself, or photographers that we work with, or specialists that we work with. This image is as we set off on the snowmobiles across southwest of Longyearbyen, and I'll talk you through the itinerary. This should take about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll do some questions. But just to read through this is obviously captivating quote that I said, or maybe one that just my marketing department put together. But I've been honored to visit Svalbard nearly 10 times. While every trip is extraordinary, this land and sea adventure is on another level, and it truly is. In a world where true adventure is increasingly rare, exploring the ultra-remote polar north changes you in the best of ways. But as we all know, our fragile polar ice caps and their extraordinary wildlife are changing too, some disappearing forever. If there's one thing you get from this, it's the time to go to witness an Arctic that resembles the one we grew up fascinated by, and that's now. I promise it's worth it. Why us as a business? We've operated in this area for 10 plus years now, and we're one of the only operators that really sort of, especially in the UK, that invests in the polar north. We operate 14 plus trips up into the polar north, into Svalbard every year on our small ship. We have our own dedicated polar team in the UK, and we put people in the right place, right time to see as much as possible. A lot of people that operate in these areas, they say that they are putting people into a small ship. A small ship in people's minds often is 50 to 100 people. And I understand that assumption because often that is the case when you're working in Antarctica. But in the Arctic, a small ship for us is just 12 people. 12 people on a small ship gives you very intimate access into some truly unique areas, into shallow fjords, and it means that transfer of knowledge from our expedition leaders is really exceptional. 12 people on board, 2 of our Natural World Safaris expedition leaders, along with the crew of the ship, means that you have 2 Zodiacs, which are the black rubber inflatable, hard-bottomed boats that you go out exploring in. It means you have 1 expedition leader in each Zodiac. So the transfer of knowledge is also really quite personable there. AECO membership, very important to us. Not everyone is a member of AECO. It's basically an organization that you volunteer, you pay, but you volunteer to become a part of. And that basically ensures that you're operating to correct environmental and responsible standards whilst you're working in one of the most fragile ecosystems in the world. So AECO membership is incredibly important to us, and we're full-fledged members of AECO. That is an advantage. Not everyone is a member of that, and it means that you do operate within certain restrictions. Some questions that may come up throughout this, obviously there are changes in regulations at the moment, polar regulations in the north, and we can talk through those a bit at the end as well. But we're still confident that we can provide you with an exceptional experience up in the polar north. We are just why us rather than anyone else. Condé Nast Travel Specialist, TNL lists for 2020 onwards, I think, etc. And then we've also run some various trips up here which link around our Expeditions for Change, our EFC trips. One of these specifically was putting 40 to 50,000 back into specific projects on the ground that we support. One of those is Polar Bears International, money going in to set up a new polar bear den monitoring site up in Svalbard, which is extremely exciting. Also, the Seed Vault and Svalbard Social Science Initiative. So we don't, none of these trips are smash and grab. We're working very consciously with people on the ground in the right areas to ensure that we're working responsibly in such a fragile ecosystem, as I say. Also, the team back here in the UK, and also we have Katie in the States. So if you need someone online over there, and Byron in South Africa and Cape Town, just on different timelines, etc., to give you a bit of an idea of who's where. First-hand polar knowledge. We're one of the only companies with an in-house polar team that puts all of these logistics together, and it's a year-round job. So a little snapshot. Tor, how are we going? All good? Sorry, just quickly. Yeah, thumbs up from next door. That's great. As I say, any questions, fire them through as we go. Tor can always interrupt me. No problem. A little snapshot of the trip. It's the first trip, as I say, that has been put together that combines land and sea. There are land trips up in Svalbard, and there are also sea trips. This one is the only one that anyone's launched that is combining the land and sea elements. It's a very unique trip, and for that reason, it only works during about 4 to 6 weeks of the year. You need enough snow to get from Longyearbyen across to Isfjord radio station on the snowmobiles, which is the first element of the trip. So the first 3 or 4 days is by snowmobile on land. And then the second element of the trip, you come up to our ship and you board for 4 days. And that is exploring via the sea up around the coastline of Svalbard. So you need enough snow to get around to Isfjord, the radio station, but then not too much snow and ice so that you can actually explore by boat as well, going up the coastlines, etc. So it's a very niche period, a bit like East Greenland and the trips we run there. You've got about a 4 to 6 week period of when you can actually run the trip. So it's quite unique, but it's fantastic. As I say, first time we recce'd the trip was this year, and then the dates for next year, which we're just launching, April the 1st to 8th and April the 5th to the 12th. So back-to-back trips. It is a small group expedition style trip. We'll run it with 8 people or a maximum of 12 people. The costs are, as you can see here, approximately 8,995 per person, and then 15,740 for single occupancy. And we can do single cabins on the ship as well. But obviously, there is a bit of a premium for that. We try and avoid it, but unfortunately, with ships, you're pretty limited on sort of covering costs, etc. I'll come on to on the next slide, I think. But this trip, for me, it's just all about how it's different. The combination of land and sea, and the fact that it's so surreal. It's not specifically a wild trip. It is more about experiencing Svalbard as an entire entity. And in every, sorry, I just need to log back in here, so that you get a combination of the wildlife, the landscapes, the scenery, both at land and at sea. The weather, what to expect on the weather? It's a good question. It's pretty cold. At this time of the year, it's probably going to be in the -10s to -20 Celsius. And with wind chill, that can go to -30. I'll talk you through a bit of the actual trip that we did this year in a minute or two. Fitness levels, in my opinion, if you're of a reasonable fitness, then you are able to do this trip. You're on snowmobiles for the first part of the trip. I'm not a snowmobile expert or anything like that, but if you can drive a car, then you can drive a snowmobile. And you are driving for approximately half a day on a snowmobile, and then you arrive at Isfjord radio station. The moon phase, first quarter to full moon, I've got no idea. Moon phase is not my speciality. I'll be talking to marketing about who put that in there, because I've got no idea what it means. They're laughing and giggling in the background over there. Where logistics, you fly into Longyearbyen in Svalbard. This just gives you a bit of an idea of orientating yourself. So it's approximately 2.5 hours from Heathrow. So if you're coming from the States, you're normally flying in via Heathrow anyway. Approximately 2.5 hours from Heathrow up to Oslo. Often you're overnighting in Oslo. There's a great little Radisson at the airport, or you can extend your trip by a day or two. And there's some lovely restaurants in Oslo as well. A lot of people do extend their time there. And then you've got a couple of hours flying up to Longyearbyen here. Longyearbyen is on the on Svalbard, the Spitsbergen archipelago, and as you can see, it's this cluster of islands all around here. Sorry if you see my cursor here. Sorry, I haven't got a better pointer. And this is a map actually from our small expedition trips, our small ship expedition trips, sorry, I should say, which are generally anything between 8 to 10 days. So these are the sort of maps of where you generally go when you're just on a fully ship-based trip. On this trip, so on those trips, you can often later in the season as well, when the snow and ice clears up, you can often circumnavigate the whole of Svalbard, which is pretty cool. On this trip, you're more likely to be in the Isfjord area and then coming down south, down here, or further north up here. So just to orientate yourself, I'm just going to flick through a couple of these slides. You arrive in Longyearbyen on day 1, and then you're moving to Isfjord radio station. So if I just show you that here, Longyearbyen, you're flying in and arriving here. You'll have the day there to sort of acclimatize and get used to where you are. It's a lovely little town. The museums are great. We may even get Hilda in, who runs Hearts in the Ice, one of the only ladies to live out in the Arctic unsupported for over a year. And the Hearts in the Ice project is fascinating. So the first day you're in Longyearbyen here, and you're staying at Funken Lodge, which is the nicest property in Longyearbyen, very cozy Arctic property. Maybe go out for a meal at Groove Le Garret, which is a fantastic fine dining experience about a kilometre out of town, with wine pairing, etc. as well. And then the next day, subject to not having had too much wine pairing, you head out southwest from Longyearbyen, around Barentsburg, and then down to Isfjord radio station, which if you see my cursor there, before I'm looking at you, hopefully you can see that. It's just under the E of Alk Hornet. That's where Isfjord radio station is here. So you're moving in the first or second day of the trip from Longyearbyen all around here on the snowmobiles, crossing a lake and down here to Alk Hornet. I'll come into the itinerary in a bit more detail, but just quickly, who's this trip for? It pretty much covers everyone, to be honest with you. History buffs, adventurers, wildlife lovers, photographers, even Graham Purdy got some good shots out there, didn't you, Graham? Oh, sorry, you're on mute, so you can't respond. But polar enthusiasts and intrepid travelers. So really, there is a bit of something for everyone. Going through the itinerary itself, day one, as I said, you arrive into Longyearbyen, so I've sort of covered that off. Day two, you then set off to Isfjord radio station. At about 9 o'clock, 9:30, you'll head down to the snowmobile pickup point where you're briefed on health and safety and fully kitted out as to what to wear, etc. You are provided with all of your gear. So whilst you will have your usual puffer jackets and fleeces, etc., you're also provided on top of that with a full bodysuit, polar survival suit, huge moon boots, big gloves, which you can also put inner gloves under, neck buffs, and also helmets as well. You do need to take your driving license because they are very strict on that. If you don't show your driving license, you'll be walking, and it's quite a long walk. So then we set off on our trip. I'll talk you through our trip. We set off at 10:30. Give or take, once we'd sort of faffed around, got our snowmobiles ready, etc., orientated ourselves, and then we set off southwest from Isfjord on these machines here. This is your snowmobile. You pack a sort of your camera gear, one bag, and then really an overnight bag with your essentials. That's all you need to take down there for the couple of nights that you're down there. And these are the machines that you're driving on. Very simple, very easy to use, sort of self-braking, and then an accelerator, and you set off. On our trip, this journey, this is probably one of the most exciting bits from our trip. We set off and it was bright blue skies, and we're all sort of pootling along, all quite sort of cocky, stopping for images and stuff like that. If this trip is clear, the weather's clear on this bit, it will take 3 to 4 hours. On about the 2.5 hour mark for us, the weather closed in and we basically ended up in blizzard conditions. From a photographic and sort of mini expedition, soft expedition point of view, it was fantastic. It really made the trip for us. It turned from a sort of 3 to 4 hour trip to about a 7-hour trip, which was really quite exciting. We're stopping for images. You can see the conditions on the bottom left-hand side of the screen here. This is just as we arrived at Isfjord radio station. So it turned into a real sort of mission to, of sort of a little bit of a challenge. I think it was Graham or Chris even said that it started off as beginner's snowmobile and then turned into actual sort of expedition style. So you eventually get to Isfjord radio station, but along the way, you can see these are the sort of things that you can see. Some of the wildlife elements, that's going to be more ship-based rather than on land, but these, it is still possible to see this wildlife on land as well. So the image in the top left-hand corner, this was a little break that we had. As you can see, the snow was kicking in. It was pretty, it was about -30 at that time, but I was actually traveling with some serious man flu at the time, and even I was still snug and warm in the gear that I was provided with. This is me in the top right-hand corner. As you can see, it was fairly snowy and windy at the time. Excuse me one sec.
Will, can I just interject quickly? I think
Yes.
we might be having some tech issues with the chat box, but there should be a question and answer box for everyone to write questions, and you should be able to see them on your side.
Okay, I'm afraid I can't see any on my side at the moment. I'll carry on and I'll click into it, and just I don't want to, if I suddenly crash it all, but thanks, Tor. Sorry for anyone if they're asking questions, but we will circle back on that. So this is really what you see along the way. Some fantastic scenery. The cabin here is a little local cabin. Uh, Fantastic scenery, etc. as well. So then you get to Isfjord radio station, and you really feel as though you have accomplished something. It's a bit like sort of Mad Max when you arrive at this place. That's the sort of scenery, a polar Mad Max, I think we described it as. But the warmth and comfort when you get there really is very much appreciated. So this place it's a remarkable place. It was built in 1933. It was a former radio station used during the Second World War. It was actually bombed twice and destroyed twice during the war, once by Germans and once by the Allied forces as well, and then rebuilt. I think it was in 46 or 47. You're on the edge of Isfjord, as you can see here, just above the here this sort of black area. This is the ocean. This is steaming hot. You get the steam billowing off this just because of the change of temperatures. The sea is so much warmer than the surrounding area, which is -15, -20 at a standstill. And then you're staying in Isfjord radio station here. The accommodation really is very snug. You're in lovely rooms, big duvets, big rugs. You've got literally fine dining there. You've got some nice hot toddies if you want them, or wine, or hot chocolates, whatever you want, whatever tickles your fancy. And as you can see, you're set amongst this sort of really historical setup, which is brilliant. This is, as I showed you on here just a minute ago, if I just spin back, this is polar bear territory. This is where the radio station is here, and this is one of the biggest migration crossing points for polar bears. Across there, obviously, it's the shortest distance from one area to another. So this Isfjord radio station is here, and the polar bears come along here, crossing over the ice here, sometimes up here, and then they mission out over here to get up into the northern section of Svalbard. So this area, Isfjord radio station, excuse while I just flick back through, this is polar bear territory, so you do not go outside by yourself. You go out with an armed guard at all times, and everything around this area is very exciting, but everything you do with an armed polar guard, even if you just want to go out for 2 minutes. The last time I was there, a couple of weeks before, they'd had a polar bear breaking into the storeroom, and they'd pretty much nicked all of the provisions. So the storeroom is just on the end of this building here. So you don't want to walk around a corner and come face to face with the polar bear. You have a lovely sauna there as well. It is facilities in terms of washrooms and showers, etc. They are communal, but I didn't bump into anyone using the facilities at the same time as me when I was there. So there were plenty of facilities for everyone, no queues or anything like that, and all very well looked after and very cozy. So you've got a couple of nights there. Your typical day going out there is out on snowmobiles, and you're going out to see up to the glacier tops. You're going out to trapper cabins, the odd shipwreck along the shoreline. You can see Arctic fox, reindeer, etc. And it's really land-based excursions to make of it what you want. I mean, we spent almost, most of the morning wandering around the radio station itself, because the photography that you get around there, looking out over the pretty wild ocean and even back at the radio station, is really pretty remarkable. So that's the land element of it. Then the next, once you've done a couple of nights there, you make your way back to Longyearbyen, back on the snowmobiles again, to pick up the ship. We actually managed to get back in just over 3 hours on the last day. It was quite good fun and quite speedy, coming directly across the lakes. And those snowmobiles can shift when you want to get back. And we actually got back into Longyearbyen around lunchtime, had a relaxed lunch in town. People managed to sort of stock up on anything they needed, and then we make our way down to our Kinfish ship at around 4:30 p.m. And you start the next stage of your adventure. So the next stage is the sea element of it, which you can see here. The image on the left is the Kinfish going through the sea ice here. Just a remarkable experience, and just surrounded, by scenery like these mountains on the right-hand side. The Kinfish, again, some of the images that you'll see along the way. The Kinfish here is a vessel that we've worked with for 5 to 8 years now, I think it is. We helped kit her out and renovate her. And she's one of the best small expedition ships that you get in the Arctic. She only takes 12 clients, which is fantastic. She's got buoyancy tanks, which help in rough waters. Generally up in Svalbard, you're in fairly calm waters, which is great. But she really gets you into very narrow fjords and right up against the ice. The other good thing about the Kingfish is you've got 6 cabins, but then you've also got various breakout areas, which are more so than on other small ships of this kind. So you've got the general mess area, you've got the surveying lounge, where we do presentations, etc. And then we have a 24-hour open bridge policy as well, which means that everyone can get up onto the bridge whatever time of the day, and you can seat 12 people up there as well. So it's great having a hot toddy or a hot chocolate up on the bridge, and enjoying the views from up there. So whilst you've got 4 nights on the Kingfish, you'll really be pushing in around Isfjord or further north or south on the map that I showed you. Really, you're wanting to get out into the sea ice. We had a lot of sea ice around when we were there, which affords these dramatic images. And we had polar bears, we had walrus, we had Arctic fox. You get pancake ice, you get this sort of tabular ice formations up in this right-hand image here. And you can see here, this is the fast ice as well, which is connecting to the glacier faces up here. So often you can get out on this fast ice and trek over these vast expanses of ice, which is really pretty stunning. You do get the chance to do a polar plunge as well, which I would recommend if you haven't done it before. A great experience, definitely wakes you up, and a great experience to have while you're up in the Arctic. Padawan's just an example of one of the small zodiacs that we get out on the ship. You can see another one here. So you get 6 of you in these as you go out exploring out on the ice. So a lot of that 4 days will be spent either exploring from the ship itself and seeing what you can see, or going out on the zodiacs. Yeah. So I think that's pretty much everything we've got there. Tor's just coming in, I think, just to see if we've got some questions. I'm just flicking back here through to see if we've missed any bits and pieces. But I think we're almost there. I think Tor's got, I think we've got control. Is it? You want to go into the chat? But bear with us 1 second. I think we need to keep showing the Q&A. Oh, we've got a couple of tests there. Anonymous attendee, is that Chris Michael guy as amazing as they say? I assume this anonymous attendee is Chris Michael, but Chris Michael is pretty amazing. Tor, just while we're doing this, could we unmute Graham as well, just so we can loop him in? Or have I got to do that for me? Okay, bear with us 1 sec. So Chris Michael is a fantastic guy, obviously. Who's better, Graham or Chris? I don't know. It's a toss-up, really. But let's get Graham on now, if I can, and see what we've got. See if Graham could add anything to the mix. We work with Graham a lot. And here we go. Graham, are you receiving? I think you may need to unmute.
Can you hear me?
There you go, mate. I can hear you now, yeah.
Yeah.
Graham, good to have you, mate. Just I've obviously been droning on for a bit, and you were on this trip with us as well. So maybe it would be good for people just to hear sort of whether there's anything that I've missed or any bits you wanted to add, etc.
Yeah, I mean, you've missed a lot. Let me. No, I think when we came back, it was such a great trip, and it was a bit hard to know sort of why. I don't mean that in a bad way, but it was. I think sometimes when you go on these trips and you're with the guides who do this. Like, we've been there before, but the guides do this every week. And the guy that we were with on our trip, when it's too warm in the Arctic, he goes to the Antarctic, and he's quite a serious, kind of straight talking, kind of, down to earth bloke. But he was so excited; he was like a toddler. He was so excited, yeah. And it was a bit hard to put my finger on. I was thinking that I think it, there's so much information about what the trip is about. I think you've shared that pretty well in terms of the land and the sea bit. And I think the the best analogy I can think of is that it just reminded me of travel, before I, had seen much of the world. I mean, you can go to quite extreme places and extreme comfort these days, whether it's the Antarctic or safari, and these places are quite well trodden, and the experience becomes something that you can anticipate quite well. But when I first started traveling, I mean, my first time I traveled, I was a lot younger, and I went to Belize and then Guatemala, and there was nothing particularly wild about it, but it was wild to me, and I was out of my comfort zone. I went to Guatemala, and for the first time realized that people don't speak English. It's like
Yeah.
they don't speak Spanish, but it was just that was just traveling as someone who was literally younger in life, and I think this whole experience, particularly the snowmobile part, just just gently gets you out of your comfort zone, and that's what travel used to be like. It used to be like for me, and I think the travel experiences I've enjoyed the most are when I'm slightly out of my comfort zone. And
Yeah, and I think it was sort of five or six of us that have travelled a lot and quite experienced, and we all sort of came back from it feeling we'd experienced something different, really, didn't we?
yeah, and it wasn't different in the sense that none of us had been in the cold or in the Arctic. I mean, we'd all done that, but it was the way it was put together, and it was it was just this sort of, I mean, it's not gnarly. I mean, you're comfortable. I mean, you might get a
Yeah.
little bit cold here and there, but I mean, you had a minor head cold or like extreme man flu. Um, and as you say, you weren't. It's not that type of extreme, but it was a bit extreme to us because we were sort of you driving these snowmobiles, and like we just don't do that every day. And as people can see, you can barely work a computer, and if they've ever seen you drive, you're not that good. And you were fine. You were
Yeah,
fine.
exactly.
So
I think I fell off less than other people, Graham.
well, hopefully we can hear Chris like a first-hand account of what it was like. But
Exactly.
you don't need to be like fit. You're not climbing Everest. You just need to be
Yeah.
sort of, um, I guess, mobile to the sense that you can like if you could ride a bike around your local block or town or
Yeah.
whatever, then you're absolutely fine. It's not physically
And what about
demanding.
and what about from a photographic point of view? Obviously, you're a professional photographer. What did you think on that? Obviously, we've got a couple of questions here. In terms of, I can answer the one on drones. What are the chances of seeing photographing bears on this trip? It's harder because it's land and sea based. So we, we've never run a trip up there where we haven't seen bears, but we've got less time on the ship, which is where you're more likely to see them. So I wouldn't say that this is a photographic trip to see bears, but I mean, I'll loop you in here, Graham. It's a great trip to give you a lot of diverse images that you wouldn't normally get, really, I think, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and when I first went to the Arctic, I wanted to see bears, and I've always been drawn to the big mammals, and probably always will. But when I go back to Svalbard next year with you guys on Kingfish, I'm actually more excited about photographing ice and the icebergs. It's actually more
Yeah.
unique. Bears sort of look the same, but when you see the blue ice and the icebergs and the pancake ice and the grease ice and the fast ice and all these different names that you learn, and the great thing about ice is it's completely unique, and in different lightings it's really quite spectacular. So I think if the only thing you wanted to see was, particular mammals, then, maybe that's a slightly different trip. But if you want to see really unique, epic landscapes, and as Will has said, that this trip's designed, I mean, most ships aren't running because it's a bit colder and it's a bit more sea ice to kind of contend with. But that's what makes it so cool. I mean, that's what makes it so wonderful. I mean, you can go 2 or 3 months later than this, and everything's kind of green, and there's a little bit of ice and a few glaciers, and you'll feel
Yeah.
like you're in the Arctic, but it won't compare to this, which is, a white landscape in -10, -20. And I think from a photographic point of view, it's I get given the chance to go later in the year, but I think to go as early as possible, and this is earlier than earlier.
Yeah.
It's just a whole different level of opportunity, and
Yeah.
our cameras were going I think if you go, it's funny, I was just back from Kenya, and everyone's cameras pointed the same direction because there was a lion or an elephant or something. And this was a similar experience where we had, 6, 7 photographers, but everyone's cameras were pointing in different directions because there was so much to see and so much creativity to be had, that I think that the set of photos that each of us got was so different, whether it's a picture of Will looking cool in the snow, or a picture of kind of ice blowing past the snowmobile, or a mountain or a sunset or whatever else. I think that's like a good point, Will, that when you go later in the year, like, you get this 24-hour sun, which is a cool experience. Like, that's something to see. But one of the cool things about this is that you get sunsets and sunrises. And in the sort of week or so that we were there, the difference between the sunrise and the sunset changed by about 2 hours. It's so dramatic. And we had these incredible sunrises and sunsets with crazy, crazy light that you don't get in Svalbard later in the year, because the sun just circles your head the whole day, and it's a different lighting. So in terms of the answer to the question, even going to Svalbard anytime from late May, early June onwards it's a whole different landscape. Temperature, the ice, the white, the permanent sunshine is very different to this experience, where I think we were still getting, the sun was probably coming up at about 5 and going down at, I think
it's getting dusky, wasn't it? Yeah.
10 or 11
and
o'clock.
You're leading a trip actually for 5th to 13th of May in 2025, aren't you? So slightly later in the season, which is 9 days on Kingfish itself. So if anyone's interested in Graham, sort of the dulcet tones of Graham for 9 days, then that's definitely a trip to look at. Graham, if you can just stay on just in case I need to loop you in again, I'll just ping through some more of these questions, and you may feel free to chip on these as well. But are the snowmobiles single driver? They are single driver. Yeah, that's what the trip's put together on. But if you want to go, on dual, then that can be catered to. There's no difference in price just because it's costed like that, but that's the way it is. Patrick, in terms of what chance of seeing photographing bears on this trip, we would hope to see them more so, as I say, on the ship rather than land-based, but you'd still hope to see them. And that links into another question, I think, here in terms of the new rules and regulations. Yeah, there are new rules and regulations which have been brought in, which obviously we'll be adhering to. And that is the early season, when polar bears are more with their cubs, it's a 500-meter distance rule for polar bear sightings, which comes down to about 350 later in the season. And I think it's 150 meters with walrus. So those rules have been brought in. There's been a lot of discussion about why they've been brought in, or and what the motivation is behind them, because they were going to be active distances as well, which means that if you are at the required distance for a polar bear and then it approaches you, you're meant to be moving off, which there is an argument to say that actually causes more disturbance to the wildlife and the surroundings than if you sat there just as you would on a safari in Africa, being cool and calm and letting things pass you by. But that's where we are now. We've taken more bookings at this time compared to last year than ever before. So I don't think the regulations has really impacted anything at this stage, but it is something to bear in mind. And obviously, from a photographic point of view, that does change things slightly. The flip side of that is also that if you're moving further up into the sort of sea ice, then those regulations aren't sort of enforced up in that area. So up on the sea ice, it could be slightly differently, but obviously we'd be very careful about what we're doing and when we're doing it, to make sure that we're aware of our surroundings at all times. The drones, Graham, shall I loop you back in on drones and how to use or not use them? Unfortunately, they're not allowed for guests, and I think, Graham, you're probably a perfect example of why not use a drone. It was a short career, your drone career, wasn't it?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, no, my drone got hit by a mountain, so it was unfortunate.
The mountain, I think, was 30 centimeters off the ground when you were whizzing your drone across the tundra out in the middle of nowhere, so it was very safe. But I think it didn't last very long. And unfortunately, we can't use drones for up in these areas. You can when it's not when it's a staff member, etc., which everyone was on this trip. But unfortunately, we can't use drones because we abide by the AECO regulations when we're running these trips on that case. So unfortunately, we can't do that. But yeah, some of the images you see are very good. Thanks, Clay. Maybe show the last slide with the polar bear head. It's an image from Graham, even if it wasn't on this trip. So that's, everyone can see that, but thanks. So there you go. There's the image. Do you go on land during the ship phase? Yes, you do. But Graham, do you want to talk through that again rather than me joining on?
About the ship part?
Yeah, in terms of, do you go on land whilst we're staying on the ship for 4 nights, are we going on the land as well, etc.? How does that work?
Yeah. I mean, it's this is why if you go to some places to see wildlife, like that's kind of the only thing to do. And if the wildlife doesn't show up, then it can be a little bit dull, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case in Svalbard. It's such a diverse, rich archipelago with a whole bunch of interesting, cool things to see. I went there wanting to see the mammals, but when you hear the stories of the different communities, the whaling history, the little trips you can do on land on the Zodiacs, and that in itself is fun. You're getting kitted up. You're in the Zodiac. It's kind of you feel it feels quite adventurous, and this goes back to my point where you feel just a little bit out of your comfort zone until you kind of get used to it. And there's nothing dangerous about it. You're well looked after. But yeah, the little excursions are great. You do a little bit of walking on land, seeing some of the abandoned, towns, villages, whaling stations. You're able to see some walrus from a distance if they're around. So there's quite a lot of diversity. It's not just kind of walking on ice, as you mentioned, Will. Sometimes is able to park into the fast ice, which fast ice, by the way, is the slowest of ices. It's not moving fast, just means fastened or fast to land. And that's habitat, so you don't break it up. It'll melt, but it's solid sea ice, and that's the only time that we kind of get out and just walk on ice for the sake of it, because that in itself is kind of a cool experience. So whether we're parking into fast ice or going out to Zodiac, the little excursions that we do are all quite varied, and the things that we see are quite varied and fun. So it really adds to the whole experience. It's not a boat-based trip where you're never getting off and getting fresh air or getting a stretch in the legs.
Yeah. And I think, and Chris said it as well, I think what's so nice about the ships and why we like it as well is you have a very comfortable sort of environment to come back to after every excursions. You're back in the warmth, you declobber, you take your survival suits off, etc. In the boot room, and then you're back into the warmth of the ship. And you've got great food and drinks on board as well. You have access to the crew at all times, which is a very family setup, which is great. Access to the bridge with the captain, etc. So you're really out and about making the most of it, but you're not having to rough it too much either, are you? You're coming back into some warmth and a good sort of environment to relax in. I think also the thing that I've always loved about Svalbard, I know there's always a huge emphasis on polar bears, because obviously Svalbard is one of the most accessible areas as well, but is just how, okay, it is Europe, in the Arctic sort of north, but how wild it still is, and how surreal it is. I love being out there at 2 a.m. and it's still daylight and you're just in the middle of nowhere. So to have the access and privilege to these areas via the ship or via fjord radio station really is quite unique. Just quickly, just to ping through a couple more questions here, and then I think we'll start to wrap it up. But what happens if you don't hold a driving license? Yes, we can provide you a driver. That shouldn't be a problem. But you do need a driving license. We do go on land during the ship phase as well. Northern Lights you won't get at that time of year. There's just too much light around. But thanks for that question. Yeah, we do other Northern Light trips, predominantly over in Iceland, which is a fantastic area for Northern Lights. What is the difference between us and other providers who have more participants on the boat? it's really, as I sort of said, the expertise that we have in the office, the years under our belt that we have, and the fact that we sort of run these ships. We pretty much manage the Kingfish up in this area. And you are small scale, so it's only 12 people with 2 expedition leaders, so 6 people per expedition leader, 6 people in each Zodiac. That's if everyone goes out. And it's how the trips run, the style of the trip as well. It's the flexibility in those situations. With those small numbers, it means that if you get a polar bear at 2 a.m, as long as you've said yes, then you will be woken up and you'll jump into the Zodiac and you can get out and about straight away. With only 12 people on a ship, you can be in the Zodiac within 5 to 10 minutes of having a sighting. That's how quick we can get and launch people, out for sightings in the water. So that small, intimate setup really does make a huge difference. Just quickly running through just to check that I have answered all questions. I think that's pretty much it. And just looking at the boss in the next room, Tor, to see whether we've got anything. She's happy. Graham, anything I've missed a final say, or are we good?
No, all good. All good, Will. Thanks.
Perfect. Well, thanks for your help, Graham. Really appreciate you stepping in. Thank you very much for everyone coming along to listen to us. We'll be doing more of these in the future as well. If you are interested, maybe we'll do a little discount on the first couple of people that sign up for the trip. We've already got some bookings on it, but if you put webinar in the subject heading of your email and send it to sales@naturalworldsafaris.com or Angela@naturalworldsafaris.com. A lot of you know Angela already, but so sales@naturalworldsafaris.com or Angela@naturalworldsafaris.com. Then maybe for the first couple of people that sign up, we'll do a little discount for you to show our appreciation. But there you go. Call us 01273 691 642 or the US number 619 975 8082, and you'll get the guys in the office. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. And stay in touch. Follow us on Instagram, just down here @Natural World Safaris, or myself @Will Bolsover. Thank you very much and have a lovely day.